Namaste. Today we have Nitin Sridhar here for the Srijan talk on menstruation practices in Hindu culture and the Hindu point of view of menstruation. And so we have some time before the talk, so we thought that we will have a one-on-one, actually two-on-one conversation with him and take this opportunity to talk about his book and his work and all the things, all the articles that he's written, the ideas that he has discussed in these years that he's been active on the social media and otherwise. So welcome Nitin, and welcome to Delhi first of all.
Thank you.
And we hope you had a good flight and all.
Yes, it was good.
Great. So let's just get started straight with your book, Musings on Hinduism. Tell us why you wrote the book and what really prompted you to get going.
Well, it was not written as a book. It's basically a collection of my writings from 2007 and 2013. And I have always loved writing, but my basic, impelling force behind it is to share knowledge and to share, certain truths, some things related especially to the dharmic aspect, and these have been the impelling force for me to write. So whenever I discovered something, I read, I understood something, I put it a short blog or something. Or sometimes there was some issue and I was inspired, I thought this is wrong, this narrative is wrong, and then I thought, let me write an alternate version, let me correct that, and then I wrote some researched article and published it some website, some portal, newspaper, something. And much of the part of this, musings on Hinduism, a first section at least, it reflects my own spiritual journey in some sense, my own discovery of Advaita Vedanta, and I had always, slightly tilt towards the Tantric Shakta Advaita, but I had some questions on Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. So in 2012-2013, I saw a series of videos, lectures of Sringeri Shankaracharya Bhartatira Swamigal, which cleared my, some basic confusions. So as a result of that, I wrote some 4-5 articles titled Two Paths of Life, Two Ways of Reality, Two Ways of Performing Action, Two Sides of creation, Maya and Leela. So this form the very core of the book. And then there are a whole section on Vedanta where I try to, they were all small short pieces posted on Facebook, posted on blogs, and basically it was a very, due to some discussion, it was some impelling thing, I simply wrote it spontaneously. So finally I thought I should collect it, because though it was, all of them were unconnected, they all had a running theme on Hindu philosophy, Vedanta, Hindu society. I wrote a series of pieces on the Dharma, on what ails the Hindu society. And my translations and commentary, there is one Nirvana Shatkam of Shankara on which I have written a commentary. There is an English translation of Saraswati Ashtotra which I did with my wife, and there are some certain other things. So I thought we should be put together so that a new reader could have a good overview of various aspects, the diversity of Sanatana Dharma.
So you mentioned that you moved, I don't know if I'm correct in interpreting it this way, but it seemed that you said that you moved from the Shakta Advaita to Shankara's version. What is the essential difference in your opinion?
Now I say there is no difference, it is simply a difference of reference plane, I will say. From in the Shakta Advaita or in the Shaktism, the Tantra, the Advaita is purely, it basically believes in the Parinamavada. I mean, the ultimate reality, the Brahman or Shakti, it itself transforms into the universe. Whereas the Shankara's argument is that it cannot be real transformation, because once the milk becomes a curd, it no longer remains milk, but Brahman is Nirguna Nirakara, it remains Brahman even after manifesting as Srishti. So this means that the transformation is Vivarta, its appearance. Just like, when Krishna manifested that, Draupadi Vastra Harana, he manifested a sari. We cannot say from which factory he manufactured that sari, or did his hands become a sari, did his legs become a sari, because his hands, legs were there, still he manifested sari out of, it is anirvachaniya, beyond our speech. It was an appearance, the sari manifested, we can see it, but still it is not a real transformation. Krishna did not himself become a sari, right? So this is what is Vivartavada. So this key understanding, so from the standpoint, there's a very good saying in the tradition, from the standpoint of Maya, you can say that Maya transforms Parinama, real transformation into the world, but from the standpoint of Brahman, it is Vivarta itself. So it is not actually, there is a difference of opinion, it's a Prakriya Veda, and it is a matter of from which reference point you are perceiving a certain phenomenon.
Absolutely, because you are talking about things which are beyond speech anyway.
Yes.
So how you are talking about it actually doesn't make a difference to the...
Yes, it is addressed to different audience. So for some person, it becomes very impossible to conceive that, Aham Brahmasmi. For them it is said, there is a Srishti, there is a Jiva, there is a Ishvara. Because that is a Vyavaharika reality, the transactional universe, we see the universe, you are separate from me, I am separate from you, and there is some Ishvara who creates, who manifests the universe, who destroys the universe, that is there. So it's a difference about audience, the competency of audience, to which audience it is being referred
to. This is, from an, I'll switch to actually Abrahamic religions, if you like. This whole idea of, in Islam for example, that the creator and created are two separate things. The creator, I don't really have a question but an observation here. It's a very powerful narrative. There is only one God, there can be no other two gods, whatever, all of that, right? And the narrative is that the creator and created cannot be the same. But it is actually an absurd idea, because as if the creator created something outside of the creator. Yes, I mean, correct?
Yes, definitely. On the one hand, it is hold that God is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and on the other hand, there is a creator is different from creation. It makes no sense, it makes not logical, because you are saying the God is transcendent, that is fine, but he is not also equally immanent, then he cannot be omnipresent, he cannot be omnipotent, right? So that is a serious difference between the dharmic tradition, between Hindu dharma, Sanatana dharma, which perceives Brahman as both transcendent as well as immanent. In fact, in the Gita and in the Upanishads, sometimes it speaks of para and apara Brahman. Apara is the lower Brahman, that immanent aspect, and the para is the higher, the transcendent aspect. It is the Brahman itself, who is Saguna, Nirguna. And there is also a three-way classification also in our Hindu tradition, which is Kshara, Akshara and Uttama. In the Gita it is said. So the creator and creation, if it is separate, then creator, then we have to ask the question, who is the creator of this creator at all? Because if this so you cannot say creator is omnipresent, omnipotent and always present, eternal, and then say there is a creation which is separate from him, somehow ex nihilo it was created. This is ex nihilo is something similar to Arambhavada, which is not accepted in any of the Hindu tradition, that something was created out of nothing. We don't accept it because it is not logically sound. We have to have a cause for the effect. There should be a material cause, there should be a efficient cause. Upadana karana, nimitta karana. We say that Brahman itself is upadana and nimitta. They say that God is efficient, intelligent cause, but there is no material cause. It is from nothing. So there is this fundamental difference. But one interesting thing I discovered recently, I was studying Judaism, which is source of the Abrahamic system. I was studying Judaism in context of menstruation actually. So in the Judaistic spiritual interpretation, Kabbalic and Chassidic traditions, it is interesting. They have a concept. There is a one is the infinite transcendent aspect. I forgot the exact term they use in the Kabbalic and these traditions. They also have 10 Sephirot or something, if I got the name correctly, which is the imminent aspects. They are present in the manifestation in various aspects of this manifestation. So this has some parallel, not entirely identical, but some parallel of some notion that there is a transcendent, but there is also an imminent aspect. There is some recognition. But of course this remains to be explored. It is different from us, but this shows there is a seed. There was a seed of this even in some spiritual traditions in Abrahamic, but that was a minority, you can say, because I don't think Islam or Christianity as such entertained this idea.
Although I've read a book, I forget this author's name, some IS officer or IFS officer. The book is called In Search of Oneness, and it's from an Islamic perspective. And it covers Al-Hallaj, Rumi, and a whole series of Islamic scholars, and actually talks about how the idea of that everything is one is also infused in Islam, except that it cannot be spoken, because somebody who's not evolved enough would come and cut even Muhammad's tongue. There is a saying that he would cut my tongue if I were to speak of that transcendental truth. Something like that, it's in, and I believe it's that tradition carries forward in Sufi traditions, I've heard.
There are many elements of pre-Islamic paganism in Islam which survived and which eventually got thwarted because of the politics around it. Like even the tradition of Hajj,
circumambulation.
So that's also a paganic tradition.
I think this one God, that there needs to be some understanding perspective here. See, we also say one God.
Yes, exactly the point.
I can quote you, Upanishads speaking Ekam. But the point is that the difference of understanding arises because they consider one to be a numerical one. We consider one as infinity. Ananta. But even here, interestingly, this Kabbalah that I spoke about, the transcendental aspect, the name given there means infinite. Yet somehow this Abrahamic tradition, they have maintained that God is separate, this is separate, and they have often taken this one in a very limited, very numerical sense. And even in Indian tradition, who is great, Vishnu, Shiva, somehow deep down that one is infinity. Why it is saying infinity? There cannot be two infinity. Purnamada, you add, infinity remains infinity, right? So Ekam means that infinity is one. There cannot be two infinity. So whatever it is, whatever there is, that is Brahman, whatever name you call it. So there is transcendent, immanent, everything that is there is Brahman, that Tat. That is the ultimate thing. You cannot name it, you cannot call it Tat. But this cannot be used against our Murti Puja. I am bringing it here because this is an argument. I keep seeing the Zakir Naik followers and other, especially the Islam followers, saying, see, your Hinduism, Rigveda, etc. say, na tasya pratima asti. So you cannot worship an image. I think that is pure nonsense because they don't understand the context of that. What they are saying is the context is different, that it's saying there is no image. That image is not the literal image what they are saying. They are saying that ultimately it is transcendental, there is no duality. There is no duality in Brahman. There cannot be duality because it is infinite. But owing to its infinity, it can manifest in infinite number of forms, infinite number of nama and rupa. Because it is infinite, it can manifest in infinite number of forms and names. So this is Nath Pratima Asti does not mean you cannot, for worship, you cannot consider something. It may be just this tree as a symbol, as a Pratima, as an image for worshipping that one which is beyond the symbol.
And I think that word is important. The Pratima, very difficult to explain. It is not an idol, right? I mean, the way they say idol worship. Pratima is different. if you can actually reflect on the, or Ashish, if you can, maybe make a conversation out of it.
Yeah, so I think the basic difference in approach is idle. It's a matter of cognition. It's the way they think about things around us. Like we were discussing the immanence principle, that the Brahman is also what we see around us, which is not the case with, for whatever reasons, is not the case with Abrahamic faiths. So when we talk about Murti Puja, we are actually thinking of everything around us as Brahman and as infused with the same Shakti that we are, in different ways, right? Like you could even extend it to say that everything is energy and everything is, it's a manifest, even mass is energy. So that is something which is deeply infused in our culture. While when they talk about it, they look at external reality as a separate piece of existence. It's I am alive and this is dead, which is not the case. Ours is a case of gradation of consciousness. Yeah.
And interestingly, this term Murti, if I am not wrong, I had read long back, it has a meaning of a sharira, body. The Murta, it has a meaning of a sharira. So what it is saying, that we are, and add to it the fact that we do a prana pratisthapana of a Murti, only then it becomes a Murti.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Can you explain that, please, the prana pratishtha process and what happens?
Yes, see, yes. So basically, one thing is Ishavasyam idam sarvam. Brahman is present everywhere. But there are two aspects. One is Vyakta and another is Avyakta. So for example, if you take any stone simply lying here, there is Brahman there, but it is in a Avyakta, non-manifest condition, so you cannot use it for a puja, because Brahman is in a non-manifest condition. So what makes a stone or what any element, wood or anything, worthy of worship is when you make that Avyakta a Vyakta, that is non-manifest reality, into a manifested name and form. How do you do it? You do it by this procedure of prana pratisthapana. Prana means the living force, pratisthapana means establishing it. So this, by using mantras etc., we give it the prana to that Murti and it becomes a Murti. So then that Murti is the abode, is the body of the energy and the essence that comes and inhabits that Murti. So there are two elements. This temple is not just a place of congregation like a synagogue or a church etc. This is a kshetra, we call it kshetra. Kshetra is a place of energy. This is a center of energy. Shakti Pita, like we say, it is a center of energy wherein that energy either naturally manifests like in Swayambhu Linga etc., or it has been ritualistically infused with energy. So there are two aspects. One is the essence of the deity which is established there, but essence is again non-manifest. You cannot capture the essence, but you can feel the energy. This essence manifests as prana shakti, as the shakti in the external world. So one of my Facebook friend and yogi, Rohit Arya, few months back posted a interesting point, that you have this Nandi or Garuda Stamba, some mark in different temples. This actually marks as a barrier of the Shakti. He says, if with somebody who has certain sadhana and certain subtle understanding, he can sense a difference in energy beyond that place of that Nandi or the Garuda Stamba and after entering it. So that is what the influence of Kshetra. The deity has a layer of influence. You can consider it as a concentric circle, diameter of circumference of influence. So the highest concentration of that energy is in the Garbhagriha, right? So that is why only a certain people with certain shaucha and certain ritualistic requirement can enter it. Not everybody can enter it. This is not a discrimination. So, and as you move away from it, the energy decreases. And this marks, the Nandi etc. marks the area of higher concentration of energy, but this energy can move forward to much beyond that also, but we can feel it, the concentration inside that. So the prana pratisthapana is a very important procedure because that is what makes it a kshetra, that is what it makes it, we are actually worshipping not the stone, but stone becomes the body and abode. The temple is the house of the deity. So we worship the deity, we have the darshana, we do not have the concept, we don't simply go there to talk with each other, we go there to have a darshan of the deity. Just a glimpse of the face, the eyes is enough, because in that darshana there is a transmission of energy.
So
Yeah.
actually, in the worship, the idea is to in Isha, as far as I've understood, the Shivalinga, if you go in the circumference or you sit inside the temple, the Shivalinga temple, the idea is of sitting in a temple is to absorb the energy of and rather than worshipping the.
Yes, the worshipping itself is that process. What is puja? In one of the tantric texts, it says puja is surrendering such that you ultimately attain the aikya, unity with the deity. The Advaita is the ultimate thing. The namaskara, just take the simple term namaskara. The meaning here is, I read in a book by Subramanya ji, he has written a fantastic study on Dakshinamurti. So he says the namaskara starts with Sashtanga Pranama, Sashtanga Pranama, the full fledged namaskara, but it ends with Aikya, unity with Brahman. The Sayuja, the end, moksha is the ultimate thing. So namaskara, the single word has a gradation of meaning, starting with the duality and a full-fledged namaskara into the highest namaskara, that is Aikya, moksha. So this is the depth of...
In fact, one of the other contrasts that we can draw between Abrahamic and Dharmic traditions is the way in which we interact with the universe. And by universe I mean the Devi, Devtas. And we are free to establish our own relationship with the deity according to the nature of the deity. So it's not free for all. It's not in the sense that you can treat a Devi or a Devata in whatever way you want, but which is also in accordance with their nature.
Yes.
And which makes us more aware of how we deal with the different types of the infinite manifestations, the infinite expressions of the universe. Which is not.
If you are an Aghori, you cannot treat the deity as you like.
No, as you like, the bhav that you express with the deity. Like for example, if you were to do a sadhana of Ganesh, so you can treat Ganesh as a friend. You can treat Ganesh like Sri Ramakrishna. He treated. You have the concept of Ram Lalla, right? Yes. So you treat him like your child. It's a Vatsalya bhav. You can even become a Hanuman and surrender. So there is different ways of expressing. I'm not going into the Aghora aspects just to for reducing the complexity of the argument. But there is, which brings me to another point, and which you have also written about, and your talk is also around the same thing, is how we deal with nature, how we interact with nature. And how we reconcile with the raw power of nature. It's not just so that in the modern Western tradition, when you talk about anything of nature, you generally romanticize it, or you talk about the beauty, and so you see the trees, you see how beautiful it is, how green it is, and while at the same time you're destroying it. So that hypocrisy has sort of become ingrained in modern culture. But when you look at any ancient culture, you are very, very well aware, and you're very conscious of the fact that nature has demonic forces. And by demonic, I need not necessarily mean demon. I'm saying demonic as in it's amoral. It can just destroy everything.
Violent, I would say.
It's violent, yeah. There's violence inbuilt.
I think that's a very important.
And part of that interaction with nature, or being aware of that fact, is the difference in the attitude of the sexes. When we talk about male and female, when we talk about peace and war, masculine and feminine. So cultures like Hindu culture and other pagan cultures, like which are now non-existent, they had a very profound understanding of of the female side, the yin part, so to speak, which is not there in the current modern culture, and it has evolved to a point where it is no longer sustainable. So when we talk about menstruation and these issues that you've talked about, what is your take on the modern feminist political movement when they talk about equal rights, equality for men and women? They neglect gender differences. In fact, they deny gender differences. They say that it's a social construct and all that. How do you?
I think you have already answered that question. They deny something which is natural, the differences. Forget gender. Let's take two persons, me and you. Am I same as you? No. I have my own desires. I have my own swabhava, temperaments, likes, dislikes. When two people of the same gender are different, how can you say that two people of different gender are same? So this sameness argument is fallacy. What it has ended in the Western feminazi movement, I would say, is this. On one hand, it has portrayed masculization of women as a goal. What you are saying, this equality. By equality, what they mean is, see, men have been doing all these works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you have to do all these works. It doesn't matter whether they want to do it. Common people, common women, whether they want to do it or not want to do it, whether they have even inclination to do it or not, whether that work even has any positive effect on them or not. See, they say men take alcohol, men smoke cigarettes, so you have to do it to show your freedom, your liberation. But the fact that the smoking and alcohol may be having adverse effect on men will also have adverse effect on women is completely missed. So there is one aspect is masculization of women, but the second aspect is also this. They also say this is a hypocrisy, that this is, take menstruation, this is a women's topic. Who are you, man, to dictate me what we should do? This is my body, this is my life. So what they want to construct, they to consider misogyny or patriarchy as something bad. They want to do the reverse of it, where everything is, men cannot speak about any so-called women's topic, and men cannot speak about their own topic because there is equality. So it's causing violence on everybody. It's causing violence on women themselves, because what they are doing, they are denying women their unique identity. They are denying women their femininity, their feminine nature, their feminine character. They're denying them their own, what's good for them, what's beneficial for them, by portraying some artificial utopian idea. It may be equality, it may be masculine. Equality is just a name for masculization of women.
Like, I was reading about this concept of androgyny, where males are asked to become like females, psychologically become like females, because it's a man-dominated world and all that, and females are free to be whatever they want. So it's quite funny, because if you have to arrive at something which is neutral, then both of them have to move in that direction. But no, one side is free. But so this is a very commonsensical argument that you make. Of course, you can't deny these differences, and you can't expect women to increasingly become like men, and then claim that we have a different identity, which is scary, because now with technology you could even take this to the extent that, because now the idea is to use technology to actually completely shut off nature, which is what basically the whole idea is. This business of keeping nature away and sanitizing everything is what is where the world is headed.
See, I'll give you one example here in this context regarding nature. In any older traditions, you take Greek, Rome, even Hindu. I will be speaking about Hindu ways of menstruation today. But in all these traditions, you have concept of deities of menstruation. In Greek you have Artemis, in Rome you have Diana, in Egypt also you have everything. But today what is menstruation? It's just a biological activity. I am on the rag, I don't want to do it, but somehow it's my compulsion, I cannot simply shut it off. And in fact they have invented pills to shut it off. So they are committing, real violence is being committed here by opposing nature, by opposing what is something to be celebrated, what is something which is, which is very nature order of things. They are trying to upset this harmony by building utopian concepts of equality. They are doing it everything in the name of equality. See, I understand that in the Western Christian society there were some inequalities, and there some the so-called equality argument had its role, because there was a oppression or suppression of women's role in Christianity, the whole tradition. But today the equality argument has been so taken far away, so to the extreme, that it simply makes no sense. It simply denies diversity, it destroys diversity.
So I think the logical conclusion to this, what I was saying, is that you will finally go for lobotomy, and whatever controls the sexual urges, you will go to such an extent that you will completely destroy any sexual expression. That's where it is headed to. You will have test tube babies. Because ultimately that is if you take the political feminist movement to its logical conclusion, that is where it is going to be.
That's the idea.
No, they don't need differentiation. They don't need sexual differentiation. Men and women are just.
They don't even need men. What they need, they will have a lot of collection of sperm banks and a lot of things, and they will simply eliminate men, and they will have new generations.
Exactly.
That is what they need.
Is something I read. So I want to bring you back to something that has troubled me. I recently heard a talk by Dr. Bharat Gupta and then by Dr. Shankar Saran, and this difference between dharma and religion. Just to give you a little, maybe step back and give a little context here. There are so many hundreds of sects within Hinduism. There are Deras who have their own life. There is Brahma Kumaris, there is Radha Swami, hundreds and thousands, and you and I could form a sect tomorrow and with no objections within the framework of Hinduism. Brahma Kumaris, for example, has this idea that Shiva, there is only one Shiva, and it's egg-shaped. And I've had arguments at the Mount Abu headquarters of Brahma Kumaris with the sannyasis over there, that why is it egg-shaped, and how do you know? No, it is egg-shaped. Okay, I'll take that. There is some dogma in everything, right? Only Vishnu is the Parabrahma or Shiva is the Parabrahma. That's fine, we can argue about it and all of that. It's egg-shaped or non-egg-shaped, or it has no formless, nirakar. I found that actually Islam, if it were not to say that it is one separate and the purest of religions, it could actually be, within the framework of Hinduism, it could simply be adopted, another one idea who anybody has. Would it not be? And if so, then what is the difference between dharma and religion? Right? So Sanjeev Sanyal, for example, writes that it is self-defeating to say Hinduism is a way of life and it is not a religion. I take that point also because we are in a world where we cannot fight a battle which is asymmetric. If to use the same language, same terminology to survive, to find our identity, if you like. If we keep saying it's a way of life, we will keep getting attacked by conversions and more proselytization and all of that. So I think it's a good idea to protect. I'm sorry, my long question, but lots of observations there. So
you made two important points. One is difference between dharma and religion. Another is about the opposing forces of assimilation versus what is called inculturation and conversion. So you basically you have raised two important points. So one is that dharma versus religion. Another is opposing forces between assimilation and inculturation or conversions. Firstly, dharma and religion, let us take the term religion. Usually it is understood as, derived from the term, I think Latin term, it is religare or something, which means binding, to unite. So in the Abrahamic interpretation, the unity means there is a unity of goal as well as means. There is one God, one prophet, one book, one means for salvation. So there is unity of means as well as the goal. Now let us take this meaning of unity itself. We also speak of unity, but our unity is not in both means and goal. We say the goal may be same, moksha, but the means are hundreds. There are different valid means, but even the goal, it is interesting that not all traditions define moksha in the same way. There are gradations there. We speak about three kinds of pralaya are there, Nitya pralaya, Naimitika pralaya, Atyantika pralaya, Prakriti pralaya. So there is always a gradations, but still if you say the ultimate Atyantika pralaya, it will include everything, you may say. So religion, if you are defining purely from the Abrahamic definition, how they understand it, then we cannot be a religion. We are not a religion. So when we are using it in a Indian context, we use Hindu religion. This is a widely prevalent use. We accept it or not, it is already in use. But mostly we do not mean it in the Abrahamic way. In Indians, we have a shallow understanding, yet in a deep down we know ekam sat vipraha bahudaha vadanti. There is only unity in goal, not in the path. So even Vivekananda etc. used religion in that sense as a spirituality. Dharma on the other hand, what is dharma? Dharayate iti dharma, that which upholds the entire universe and all the individuals. So it is not a faith, it is not a belief sect, it is ultimately, what is dharma? Upliftment of everybody, the order, the whole universal order, starting from the universal orders, ending with the upliftment or well-being of everybody, it is dharma. So dharma is universal by its own very design. You don't need a faith to make dharma universal. So that there lies the doctrinal difference. In Christianity or in Islam, you have a religious obligation to convert everybody, to convert the whole universe to that one true faith. But we don't have a obligation. We say everybody is a dharmic. As a Hindu, by default, you may choose to go away from it. You may choose to call yourself a Buddha, Jaina, Christian, etc. You may be born in such a geographical condition like Middle East or where dharma tradition has died out. The pagans, they were all manifestations of dharma, right? So, but dharma is universal. It will always remain universal, because what is dharma refers to? It is the eternal principles. In a physical level, you say gravity can be called as a dharma. It's a manifest. Swami Dayananda Saraswati of Asha Vidyakula has given a very interesting understanding of this in one of his public lectures. He says, in the physical laws of the universe is not just the laws. It's a manifestation of Brahman itself on the physical level. So that is dharma. Similarly, in the ethical aspect, the so-called Samanya Dharma, what you say, it is a manifestation of Brahman itself in that ethical aspect. So this is the basic difference between Dharma and religion. So this comes to the question of way of life. I think though we can say Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma, actually we are Sanatana. Hindu is a foreign term. We have adopted it, fine, but we are Sanatana Dharma. And we need to sometimes, when we are doing self-critique of our tradition, we need to make a differentiate between Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma are the essential principles which is eternally valid. Hinduism is the outer form, you can say, that has historically evolved. And this outer form may have faults, like with any institution, it develops faults over years. But this principle, the structure is such that it is self-evaluating and self-modifying. So the essence is very important, and we need to recontextualize the principles and redevelop the form, change the form according to the essential principles. So when we say the way of life that comes from the Radhakrishnan, he put it in a certain context to differentiate between the faith, the essentiality of faith, of belief in Abrahamic religions, and the essentiality of practice in Sanatana Dharma. But today it has been stretched and distorted. Everything is a way of life. Even as Christian is a way of life, right? But Dharma is a way of life, yes, but it is much more than that. Dharma is eternal principles itself, the sum total of everything. It is Brahman itself. And secondly, the assimilation, you said that yes, it is true, if the Christianity, Islam, etc., they leave their intolerant aspect which is very core to them. There have been attempts at,
Which is about only my faith is true.
yes, I will not tolerate you is the basis. But they cannot leave it, because once they leave it, they lose their essential identity itself, right? So there lies the problem. There lies the root of all issues, all the, it's a completely different way of life. One is life affirming, one is ahimsa is the core, samanya dharma, and another is basically it's intolerant. Basically its core is I will not tolerate you, I will not just tolerate, I will not accept you. I am alone correct.
See, if you look at it in a, I'm sorry if you have something else. So if you look at it from the point of view of interacting with nature, so you look at the journey of humanity from the time of the hunter-gatherers to the current technological era. So you have these major landmarks that from hunter-gatherer you became an agrarian society, then you had the, broadly speaking, then you had the industrial revolution, then you have the information technology. So at each point there is this struggle of controlling nature, there is a struggle of dominating it, and it is only in the current world, it is only the Hindu tradition which has maintained an unbroken connect with the hoary past where we all started from. And so in that sense, what Hinduism does is that it respects that past, and it respects the fact that you can never defeat nature. While the others are more arrogant, and every time there is something which mankind does which is in terms of achievement and isolates it from the universe, from the nature, then it sort of tries to deny that past and say that no, now we have started afresh and this is how we are. So that is reflected in this tolerant versus the intolerant attitude. It is in simple terms a way of being aware of the indomitable or the undefeatable spirit of nature.
To add to that, the very concept of dharma, its roots in the Rig Veda, the term is Rita. Rita is order, cosmic order. So we are not only aligning ourselves to our immediate nature, but also to the cosmos itself, and that reflects in all our sankalpa. Any puja, anything, sankalpa starts with the whole thing, the where it is, which manvantara, which kalpa, which manvantara, which geographical area. There is whole thing, why it is said, for whom it is said. See, it is locating our place in this whole universe, recognizing that I am inseparable part of this universe, and howsoever small I may be, I am inevitable, I have an important role for the order, for the harmony in the whole universe. So this is the real
Absolutely.
role of Sankalpa.
When you talk about, this is a very important point, when you talk about Marxism is a religion of its own, and everything that they say is by focusing on this social reality which is so narrow. I mean, if you look at the universe and then you compare the reality that Marxists talk about, it is not even microscopic. It is nowhere, when you consider the scale of the universe. So denying the cosmic dimension, denying the natural is part of any intolerant faith, which I think would make a distinction with Hinduism.
Very sad that recently read that Stephen Hawking is actually saying that in 100 years the earth will be unlivable, so it's imperative we have to start looking elsewhere, which actually is a very shameless idea in some ways, but yeah, let's not go there. But so to come back to, or connect this whole point with, I recently, was thinking, what is it to be Indian? What does it mean to be a Bharatiya? How is it different from being a Pakistan or a Bangladesh or a Russia or China or US or whatever? And so there is this idea that the essential nature of what it is to be Indian is, or Bharatiya is, its central foundation. Its foundation lies on Sanatan Dharma. The question that is then running in my mind, and I tweeted about it, that India has to decide who it wants to be, and based on who it chooses to be, it must decide its constitution. So I want to basically come to the point of secularism, and Dr. Bharat Gupta says very beautifully in his talk, he says we have to move away from nirapeksha to sapeksha. And so if you could reflect on.
I think as far as secularism is concerned, it's a Western construct, or that's a Western concern which has been artificially imported and imposed superficially on the Indian society. The problem today, what we find, is very simple. In the pre-colonial condition, we were a medieval society. We had our own society, our own things. While the different countries, many of them through wars, yes, but there was a natural evolution into a modern 21st century. In India, there is no evolution, there is a break. There is a colonial imposed break where all our Sanskrit, all our indigenous education systems were brutally shut down, brutally killed, I would say killed practically, except in few issues. And English education, Western ideas were superficially imposed, forcefully imposed. 200 years back, 300 years back, nobody would do an history-centric analysis of Mahabharata saying which part of Mahabharata came first, which part of Mahabharata came later. Nobody would say Rigveda had 10 layers, this came in 5000 BC, that came in 3000 BC. It simply makes no sense. Vedas are Apaurusheya, right? So, but today we are doing it, even the scholars, even sometimes, even in my writing, I have to, despite my own personal disinclination towards historical analysis of any of our texts, I have to sometimes mention this text is supposedly 2000 years old. So this is a majburiya, I can say, right? So Indian society was not allowed to evolve into 21st century. It may be our constitution, it may be our education, every system we are still colonized. So this secularism is again the same product. So it's not about nirapeksha, sapeksha at all. What we need is a society based on Dharma Shastra. People don't like the term Dharma Shastra. They think Dharma Shastra means medieval, outdated thing. Of course, I am not saying that. Dharma Shastra, Shruti, etc., what it is, they provide basic guidelines. They do not say society has to be this and that, A, B, C, D. No. What they say, they provide a guideline. When Parashara Smriti, for example, written specifically for Kali Yuga, you have some special overview. What we need to do is to contextualize the teachings to today's time. That was happening until the coming of the British and colonialization, right? So we were not allowed to naturally evolve into today's society. But now the society has changed, lot of things have happened. So it may not be very easy to evolve with Dharmic society or Dharma Shastra based society today, because at first place we do not have a running Dharma Shastra tradition. Today still we have Vedanta tradition, we have Advaita tradition, we have the Sri Vaishnava tradition, all these have survived, but Dharma Shastra tradition, there is no tradition. There are few scholars here and there. It is no tradition, right? First we have to revive that tradition. First we have to, you know, have some people who have in and out understanding of the tradition and also a sound understanding of today's issues, and then contextualize our teachings to today's issues. For example, in my series on abortion, I try to do it in a very limited level. I spoke about the whole theory aspect of abortion, what this says in the tradition. But the second part of the work which is pending is to arrive at a practical guidelines based on that theory. Theory is something, but practical guidelines is something else, right? So this needs to be done. So it's not about sapeksha, nirapeksha. I think sapeksha means what?
I mean, not the
Dharma
state.
sapeksh, as in
Yes.
saying that
So the
dharma
state will-
nirpeksh is like excluding dharma,
Even
dharma
excluding
sapeksh is-
dharma. Yeah, and that
It's
is
actually-
quoted from the separation of church and religion, or church controlling territories. Here, that was never the case.
But you know, another point is dharma nimeksha. What dharma nimeksha means? Separating dharma means you are becoming adharma. We do not want to become adharma, right? What they mean here is, what they actually mean, the terminology is wrong. What they actually means, pantha nirapeksha. We will be staying away from all sects. But they are interfering in Hindu traditions. They control our temples. They ban our practices by.
Suppose that were to be undone, what happens to how should India evolve is a question. I mean, can it remain secular? And
One of the things that Professor Gupt says in that talk is that we should have, and it's a very practical advice that he gives. He says that we should have in schools all religions, all being taught, which is a good idea. But you will see that the opposition for that will come from the minorities. Because they know that, if everything is talked about openly, then people will choose the best.
Yes.
And therefore it will be a problem for them. So that brings us to the point of freedom of expression. If there is free speech, we know who will be in trouble. Therefore there are restrictions on free speech.
Rangila Rasul.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, for Hindus, I think instead of actually trying to bring a change in laws, it's more pragmatic to actually go for these cultural aspects, cultural changes, and stand for these democratic values, which will naturally bring, which will naturally benefit India as a whole, without being partial about this community or that community.
Now, before thinking about constitution, laws, etc., we need first to have a narrative, an alternative narrative, on the dharmic narrative on all the issues currently there. It may be abortion, it may be menstruation, it may be anything, even in caste.
In fact, I mean, if you remove, like you said, if you remove these anti-Hindu legislations and anti-Hindu acts in the constitution, then what remains of the constitution is secular as well as in line with dharma. There is nothing which is specifically or particularly anti-Hindu in the constitution.
Yeah, I agree. It's not about, so Article 25 to 30 is where the problem supposedly starts, but
And that's basically just discriminatory. If you
Yeah,
remove
I know.
that discriminatory part, then I don't
yeah,
think
but
that
should the government actually not participate at all in religion, or actually should it start participating in dharma? Is really the question that comes to my mind.
that is a question that the whole globe is wrestling with. Even in Europe, they don't know if secularism should be a neutral secularism which has nothing to do with religion, or a positive secularism where you actually try and encourage all religions to express themselves, or a negative secularism where you
France.
yeah.
Everything is.
Yeah, so I mean, there are these different types of secularism. We haven't even gone into that debate because you just talk. This has become a taboo topic. You don't talk about secularism because it's politically incorrect. But the fact is that secularism is such a complex idea. And the other thing is that secularism has failed in the West also. If you look at Europe, with the immigration crisis, with other communities coming in and their obsession with multiculturalism, secularism is already failing. So
I think what we need to do is to evolve, as I said again, dharmic narrative of the ruler, the constitution, the government, everything. I mean, instead of simply maybe the outcome will be maybe similar to some aspects of secularism in some aspects of governance, that we will not discriminate on some issues based on who the religion is. The law will be same in some aspects, but the basis of this should be sound dharma, not on some ideology of secularism, because by ideology by definition means it is limited, and when applied to wrong places it will give wrong results. But the idea of dharma is it uplifts everything. So this is abstractly I am saying, what we need to derive is to derive concrete ideas, concrete narrative from these abstract ideas.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think we should end.
Yes.
5:40.
So thank you very much, and I think now we'll go for the talk. We wish we could have continued for longer, but I think we'll have many more opportunities to do that.
But it was good one.